Okay, so the rush of people logging in and getting kind of admitted into the session is slowed down a little bit. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are recording this session, so folks will be able to catch up while we're kind of taking care of logistics. Just first of all, let me thank you for signing up and attending this webinar. We're going to try to have a series of webinars like this every week. Ideally, they'll be scheduled for every Friday. It's going to depend on my ability to be able to recruit people to do the presentations. The goal is to find people who are actually doing distance learning in the field, have them share examples of what they're doing so that you folks can not just get a list of resources, but you can actually hear from people how they're utilizing those resources and see some examples of what an actual lesson looks like. As I said, we do have a lot of people on the webinar. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you guys to use the chat function if you're having some any technical problems. My colleague, Michelle Smith, is going to be addressing those as they come up. If you have questions for the presenters related to content, we're going to ask you to use the Q&A function to ask those questions. Both of those buttons, the chat and the Q&A, should be in the menu bar for Zoom. We will, understanding that there are 700 plus people on the webinar, the folks presenting have agreed to stay on past the end of the webinar. So what we're going to do is we'll try to answer as many questions as people post during the webinar, and we'll stick around and ask those questions afterwards and get their responses. We are recording this webinar. We'll send the recording out on Monday. And so it'll have the answers to all of those questions at the end. And just the last thing is that we are compiling a list of a collection of distance learning resources on Education Network. We're going to be working on putting all those together over the weekend, and hopefully that will be launching on Monday as well. And if it is, I will put a little notice in the email that goes out to you. So a little bit about what we've got going on today. We've got two groups of folks that are going to talk to you, each for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to spend the remaining time answering questions. So our first group is going to be from Literacy, New Jersey. That's going to be Jessica Tomkins and Rebecca Powers, and they're going to talk to you about how they've implemented some distance learning. And then we've got two folks from the Literacy Alliance in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Brian Schlichtenmyer, and hopefully I got that pronunciation right, and Francine Liebhauser, and they're going to do the same. Before we get started with them, I do have a quick poll, and I'm going to share the results, and it looks like about 3/4 of you are actually doing distance learning. That's good. And really about half of you feel pretty good about what you're doing, looking to make it better, but kind of glad that you were able to implement something. So I think that's a good start for the position that we've been put in, and a lot of us weren't planning on being in. So having said that, I am going to turn things over to Jessica and Rebecca.
Hi everyone, this is Jessica. I'm going to get us started. I'm just sharing my screen, hopefully. Thank you, Todd and Michelle and ProLiteracy for doing this. I think this is really cool. I'm really looking forward to our part being done and getting to hear from Indiana and then all the future presenters. We really need this a lot right now. Okay, so I'm just going to get us started, and then Rebecca and I will go back and forth. Just to give you some context, this is our statewide organization. In the dark blue counties, we run direct service programs. So those are the programs that we're going to be talking about today, where we've been trying to figure out how to do this remotely. And you'll see Burlington is this giant one down in the middle on the left. That's Rebecca's county. If you, she runs the program there. if you're not from New Jersey. So we have these 10 programs. We were on track this year to serve just under 2,000 students and 600 tutors. And when we all went home and started doing this, there were about 900 active students. We really started from scratch. We had no distance learning in place, despite any number of projects over the years to try to make that happen. We really had nothing. So this presentation is very much about starting from scratch and what we've been able to do in the first few weeks. So March 16th, starting then, all our staff were working remotely. All face-to-face tutoring was suspended. Pretty much every library in the state was closed by then. And we started figuring out how we were going to do distance learning. I just want to spend a couple of seconds on the barriers. I think we all have these in common. There's lots of good reasons that distance learning has been very hard to implement in adult literacy programs, and many of those reasons are compounded by the current crisis. So this is all real, and it's the context. We don't have time to worry about this right now. We just have to move forward. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this is our context, because within all of this and the crisis we're experiencing, we've seen a lot of distance learning be possible in the past few weeks. So for me, that's really important. It's really something to know, and it will inform how I think about what is possible going forward. Rebecca, did you want to add to that a bit?
No, just to say that, yeah, we're definitely been up against a lot of barriers as we reach out to students and continue to engage volunteers at this time.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a joke to divide what's been happening into phases. It's been like 3 weeks, but the pace has been so fast, both in the whole outside world and in the changes in our program. So we tried to kind of organize what's been happening into phase 1 and phase 2 to be able to talk to you about it. So on day 1, we had nothing in place. No one was prepared. We were all home. And of course, our priority was to not lose our students and not lose our tutors. And so we just had to start with, what did everyone already have in their hands and already know how to do? So in this context, really the most important technology was the telephone, and that was our starting place. And I'm going to let Rebecca talk about what this was like for her and her program.
Yeah, so initially that first week we reached out to tutors and were asking who was able and willing to work remotely with students. What we found, we did get some hard no's from some volunteers, but then we got some good feedback from tutors who said, yeah, I'm interested in doing this, but I just don't know what it looks like. So my colleague, Matt Ford, and I created a webinar just to give these volunteers a vision of how distance learning could look for them. Our focus for this webinar was helping tutors adapt their lessons to distance learning. We didn't ask them to learn any new techniques. We didn't ask them to learn any new technology. We wanted them to use everything that they already knew how to use right now. So that would include, making phone calls and texting and emailing. And what we did in the webinar was show them what these lessons could potentially look like using techniques like dialogues and drills, using articles and short stories as listening exercises. So then as the weeks progressed, we learned more. We have volunteers now using video chat such as Zoom and FaceTime. We grow each week in what we know and in the ways that we're connecting with students. We're becoming a bit more sophisticated in how we're reaching out to students at this time. We are using Zoom often. We've started using their breakout sessions that's available in the basic free version of Zoom. And so what this looks like for us is students and volunteers will begin working in a main session in the main room. We check in with everyone. We give them resources that have come through that week, such as unemployment benefits, job opportunities, etc. And then we move into the lesson. We introduce vocabulary. We talk about the drills and the dialogues. We might read articles depending on the level that we're working with. And then as the host, I manually place these students into breakout rooms, 1 tutor and 3 to 4 students, depending on who shows up that day, where the students then get extra practice with the material. This has helped us lessen the dead time that happens, that we have seen happen in the bigger breakout room sessions. Students that are shy now have more opportunities to speak and feel more comfortable in those rooms. You know, within a face-to-face session, if a tutor is working one-to-one with the student, but they have other students in the class, those other students are able to, you know, check in with each other, ask for clarifications. But in a Zoom session, what we noticed is that if we were trying to help a student with pronunciation, that other students might then be distracted. So these breakout rooms have been instrumental in you know, making sure that everyone is engaged during the ESL classes that we offer. And so essentially we've gone from, you know, phone and texting and emailing to video chats and breakout sessions as our classes and our knowledge grow during this time.
So talk about not realizing that things were possible or things being possible. Now Rebecca's teaching classes on Zoom with breakout groups. It's very cool. So that's a really good place to go to our next slide and pause for a moment of gratitude. Just let me say something out loud that you all know. Adult literacy staff, volunteers, and learners are amazing. I already knew that. I've always known that. I've worked in this field for a while. But even knowing that, I have been really blown away by what people have been able to accomplish in the past few weeks in the middle of a crisis. Just like the creativity and adaptability and commitment has been really amazing. So all of you adult literacy staff, volunteers, and learners, I'm sorry if I underestimated you. You're even more incredible than I thought.
I'd like to add something there too. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is to allow people to surprise you in what they're capable and willing to learn at this time, and to make no assumptions that if a student has children at home that she won't want to attend a class. We have students bringing children into our Zoom classes. We see cats and dogs walking by. We have spouses sitting there helping their partners through these classes. We're all in the same position now, and what I'm seeing is that we are more likely to offer that grace to each other during this time, and it's become a family affair, and it's been so beautiful to see develop. As for tutors, we don't want to assume that just because they don't have an email address that they're not willing to be of service right now. This situation has certainly asked people to step up, and we're seeing tutors tackle new technology where there was once resistance to learning in this area. People truly do want to be of service. So I would just encourage you to throw those opportunities out there for volunteers and let them surprise you.
Here's some initial results. This is very rough data. It's still coming in. This just happened a minute ago. But after the first 2 weeks, we saw that we had at least 163 groups or pairs meeting remotely. And over 330 students we already have hours in for the end of March for distance learning. So that's about a third of the active students we had going into this situation, which I think is amazing, and it's growing. It's definitely growing from here. And on the right, and this is across our 10 programs where we run direct service. And then on the right, you can see the chart of what tools they're using. Many tutors are using multiple tools, but you can see that Zoom is the popular one. Almost half of them are up on Zoom, but a quarter are using phone and email and meeting, you know, at least weekly, and then almost a quarter using WhatsApp as well.
Yeah, I'm serving at about 35 to 40% of the number of students that we were serving 4 weeks ago. However, this number grows each week as our students and volunteers establish a new routine. They're accepting this new normal, and we're finding that they do want to continue their studies or to serve students. And now I think it's been about 4 weeks for us. We're reaching out to tutors and encouraging them to reach out to students who initially said no, because now they may be in a better position to add tutoring back into their lives.
So again, it's a little bit of a joke phase two. It's that this is now a few weeks into this. We're looking at everything we're doing in these two veins, or this is how we're thinking about it. So on the one hand, we're upgrading our skills. So we have people who are up and running with remote or online tutoring. For them, we want to continue to do webinars. We want to, and professional development. Maybe they need new tools to bring in or materials. Maybe they've got this all down and they want to think about how to be a stronger educator in this kind of environment. So wherever we are, we want to try to upgrade our skills and do it better. And then in general, we want to keep everyone engaged. So there's some people that just can't participate in distance learning. we're going to get to a time where this is just part of our program and we're back out. We want to keep everyone engaged because, of course, like our people, we want to keep people connected because these literacy skills are more important than ever while we're in this crisis and there's all this information. So we want to make sure we're all taking care of each other. So we've kind of brought in types of services. So we have some staff that are piloting like homework rooms where students can make an appointment to bring their child to a virtual tutoring session and get some homework help for the kid or some help with, you know, communicating with the school, things like that. Just about everyone is doing online tutor roundtables and some are doing book clubs, et cetera. So we're trying to come up with as many ways as possible of touching everybody weekly, even if people aren't part of these remote tutoring sessions.
Yeah, we've been asked to adapt during this crisis to survive. And I think for Literacy New Jersey, this looks like, you know, meeting students, meeting their current needs. So this includes their family and expanding our services to assist the family, especially to parents who are homeschooling right now. We are certainly in the perfect position to offer parents that assistance as the school is just not capable of providing it right now. Tutors, as Jessica said, are offering homework help to children. We are in a position to make sure that government information and resources are getting to the people who are affected most during this economic downturn. And for us, this is looking more like we're asking volunteers who are unable to tutor, as Jessica said, to just continue to reach out to students with information as a way to continue to engage both students and tutors. In my program, we had started a tutor training 2 weeks before our shelter in place came down. And as a way to retain these volunteers, we place them as assistants in our Zoom classes. They help us facilitate our breakout sessions. And they're also gaining some valuable tutoring experience, you know, without the pressure of having their own group at this time. As an organization, we are looking at the potential that this situation offers in ways for us to grow. We knew before this crisis that digital literacy was a necessity. Was a necessary skill for volunteers and students, but convincing people to up their game in this area was met with a lot of resistance at times. Now that people are in a position to see the necessity of digital skills, we're adding that to our tutor training as well as our student intake to include more digital literacy opportunities.
I just lastly wanted to show you guys the distance learning page we have on our website. This is not a really comprehensive list of everything, but it links to some great lists like ProLiteracy and World Ed have on their sites. But for us, this is more about some of the simple, easier to reach resources. So we have a section on low tech lesson ideas. That's one of the things we started with in our phase 1. And links to the webinars that Rebecca and Matt have done, which have been really, really popular with our tutors around the state. And down at the bottom, our video library, Rebecca's the pioneer on this too. So you can see it's 3 classes that she has taught on Zoom where we have some video clips so that people thinking about jumping into this can watch them and get an idea about what that might look like. And that's been kind of inspiring for people who are a bit nervous about it. So I'll stick this link for you guys in the chat so you can check it out.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out those resources on low tech ideas as just a way to encourage volunteers to take that next step into remote teaching. The webinar and the videos are also great resources to show tutors how distance learning can look too.
All right, so that's it for us, I think. Thank you guys, and please wish us luck and good luck to all of you.
Jessica, before you stop sharing your screen, we've got a couple of questions, and then I wondered if you could show people like a little bit of the video clip that you showed yesterday of the actual classroom demonstration.
Okay, let's see if I can figure that out, Todd.
Okay, and while you're figuring that out, I'll ask the question, and maybe Rebecca can respond. So we've had a lot of questions about using Zoom, and have you guys had any issues around security issues around people kind of jumping in and interfering with your classes or anything like that? Because I know there's been a lot of stuff on the news about that happening.
Yeah. So definitely this is one of my volunteers' biggest concern as well. So what Zoom has done is you have the option to lock a room once everybody's in there. Certainly don't share your Zoom link on your social media, because then anybody can grab it and just join in on your meeting. There is a passcode that's I think required for a lot of meetings now. For us, we ask just about everyone to identify themselves, but then before they come into the meeting. As you can see on the screen here, those people that you can't see, we told them that we were recording, so they turned off their video. So we verify through videos to make sure that they are who they say they are.
Okay, great answer, thank you. And Jessica, remember, if you are sharing and want people to hear the audio, you've got to go up to that view options and share computer audio.
All right, let's see if this works. Rebecca, is this a good one?
Yeah, this is great, I think. So let's talk about, today we're going to talk about exercise. Yes. Exercise. Yes. What is exercise? Exercise. There we go. You're all unmuted now. What is exercise?
I am walking.
Yeah, walking. Excellent. Walking. When you walk, you exercise. Excellent. That's what I do. That's my exercise too. I walk. Yeah, I walk. What other types of exercise do you do?
Run.
You run.
Whoa.
Yeah. Run. That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Swim.
What's that, Zeppi?
It's a swim.
Sleep? Is sleep exercise?
No, swim.
Oh, swim. Thank you. Swim. I wish sleeping was an exercise, but swimming, excellent.
Yeah.
Swimming in the water at the beach, right? Oh, there we go. Carolyn's background, she's got water there. We could go swimming at the Golden Gate Bridge there.
Yes.
We can swim there. Excellent. Monica, do you exercise?
Yeah, abs in the house.
What do you do? What do you do? Do you lift weights?
Abs.
Abs. Excellent. Abs. You work the stomach muscles. Abs. And then I said, lift weights. Lift weights. You make those muscles really strong. Lift weights. Can you read my handwriting? WEIGHTS.
Okay, Jessica, I think that's a good clip. So we can see that not a lot of technology required for that, other than just being able to connect your students with Zoom, and we see the teachers just using a whiteboard and holding it up in front of the camera on your computer or phone to be able to share what she's written with students.
Yeah, I love that one because it's a beginner class, and I think that's a little hard for some people to imagine. It was hard for me to imagine until Rebecca played it out. So.
And Rebecca, this was like a beginning level ESL class, is that correct?
That's correct. This is the first class that we held on Zoom, the very first class for the beginner ESL students. We had about 5 people show up for the first time, and they all really enjoyed it. We had a great time. We did some total physical response on this as well, and that worked out great. We did this, and we did a dad joke on this, and they really enjoyed that as well.
Great. And I just saw a question about how can we use a whiteboard, and I actually just wrote a blog on this about using your cell phone and creating a little education studio. And it's really easy to create a whiteboard at home. If you have a picture frame with glass in the front, take the picture out, replace the picture with a piece of blank paper, and then you can write on the glass and with a white background, and you have an easy do-it-yourself whiteboard. Find a dry erase marker. When you're filming, you have to be careful about the glare on the glass, but that's it. Okay, Jessica, Rebecca, thank you guys very much. And let's switch over to Brian and Francine. So I am going to unmute Francine and unmute Brian. And there we go. Brian and Francine, you guys take over and you're sharing your screen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Schlichtenmyer with the Literacy Alliance. Thanks, Todd, for inviting us to participate in today's webinar. I thought I'd share a little bit of background about the Literacy Alliance and our experience with distance learning, and then share our experience with transitioning to online classes. The Literacy Alliance has been providing adult basic education and high school equivalency preparation for 32 years. We provide mostly classroom-based services to help adults improve their reading, writing, and math skills, and most come to us to prepare for the high school equivalency test. In Indiana, we use TASK instead of GED. Our mission is to prepare adults for success, and that's essentially to help them through instruction to reach whatever goals they aspire to, whether it's obtaining a high school credential, improving basic skills, gaining employability skills, or passing certification exams. We serve about 200 adult learners a year. Last year, over 50 of them passed the high school equivalency test. Our classes are staffed by paid teachers, site coordinators, and trained volunteer tutors. The teacher's role is to guide instruction and learning. Site coordinators manage the classes, making sure the environment is conducive to learning, and they track attendance, they follow up with students, and manage attendance and behavior issues. The classes meet 3 days a week. For a number of years, we worked to develop a distance learning platform. We believe a strong distance learning capability would help our students in 3 ways. First, by supplementing classroom instruction as a way for students to engage in learning outside of class. Second, by providing a hybrid option for students who, for whatever reason, cannot come to all 3 classes. For instance, if a student can come to Monday and Tuesday class, but not Wednesday, we could make an agreement with them to attend X number of hours a week in class and X number of hours working in the distance tool. And third, benefit students by allowing them to make up missed class hours. So if they've missed a class, or if they get into what we refer to as attendance jeopardy, because they're not attending at least 75% of the hours, they can make up that time through the distance learning tool. And the distance learning tool we've been using for the past 3 years is Aztec. And we've had some success. Our percentage of enrolled student hours in distance learning is higher than the state average. That said, we did not have a standard distance learning only program. And when the possibility of suspending classes emerged, we talked about preparing students to continue their participation through Aztec and other means. We had about a day to do that. Site coordinators and teachers made sure students knew their Aztec username and password, and they informed students about what we plan to do to continue with online classes. And March 13th, it looked like businesses were going to close, including all the school corporations, and students were calling site coordinators all day long. By March 15, we decided to suspend classes until further notice. The next day, we had an all-staff meeting to decide what we needed to do. To try to continue business as usual, we would strive for 3 things. First was to keep the communication channels open, and staff have been doing just that. They've been calling, emailing, texting students every day. Second, to track students' participation. Mostly the site coordinators have been doing this, logging their minutes and hours of participation. And an example of what I see as a degree of success is the first week we were doing this, students participated 177 hours. On the second week, that increased to 286 hours. And I see that as a success because we're getting more students to put in more hours. And third, what we're trying to do to continue business as usual is to monitor students' engagement with learning, making sure they're doing the work and then following up to make sure that the students are benefiting from the work that they're doing. At the all-staff meeting, teachers had a variety of methods in mind on how they would engage students in learning. And we had a Zoom account, and some teachers had begun scheduling Zoom meetings. Some of the teachers were unsure about Zoom, but as they saw successes with its use, they started using it. And now all teachers are conducting face-to-face lessons for a couple hours a week, at least. It's not been easy. For instance, we did not have time to get training on Zoom, so we learned mostly through trial and error. And I was surprised how many students did not have computers or internet access, and most of them right now are using mobile phones. Site coordinators learned early on that they would join Zoom meetings and they would see which students are not participating. And then what they would do is they would contact those students right away by phone, text, email, whatever it took to help the students with connection issues or see if there are other issues that are preventing them from getting to class. And as Jessica and Rebecca mentioned, we've encountered all of those issues that they described, and our site coordinators have been acting as quasi case managers, not really doing casework, but providing suggestions and referrals to help students with all of those struggles that they're experiencing right now. But I attribute our success to the ingenuity and persistence of the Literacy Alliance staff, and I'm grateful to Francine for participating in this webinar to share some specifics about what we've been doing, what she's been doing in her classes. So Francine, thank you for participating, and I'll now turn the microphone over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks for having us, Todd, and hosting this webinar. I hope that it'll be helpful to other adult ed staff across the nation. I'm coming from this as a teacher, and this was really my first time teaching a distance learning class. So it was all new to me, but I'll share what I've learned, and hopefully it will be able to help some other people. So I had two main goals when we were delved into this distance learning arena. And my goals for my students were to create a sense of community as well as being consistent. And excuse me, so I decided to use two main platforms to achieve those goals. One is Zoom, which seems like many of you are using, and the other is Google Classroom. And I chose those two platforms specifically because I polled my students, and when I polled them right before we were leaving class, none of them had access to a computer at home. They did all have mobile phones, but they didn't have computers. And both Zoom and Google Classroom work well with a mobile phone. So that's why I chose those two platforms. So I just want to give you a little peek into my classroom, and hopefully it will help give you some ideas. This is a screenshot of a Zoom classroom that we had one day. And we all know in times of uncertainty, I thought that consistency would be the most important thing that I could give my students. A lot of them had lost their jobs, lost hours at their jobs, had their children home from school. And so I wanted to create a sense of normalcy rather than more stress. So we set up our Google Classroom. I was blessed. I had about 30 minutes with my students the night before everything closed down. So I was able to help them download the app and make sure that they knew how to get on to Zoom. And from there, we just learned as we went. So I wanted to retain our class theme. Our class theme for 2020 is extreme ownership. And maybe some of you are familiar with that from Jocko Willink, his book and his TED Talk. We watched his TED Talk in January and decided that that would be our class theme for the year. So I wanted to continue to use that. I wanted to continue, especially to use the same schedule that I had always used. I thought it was important to be able to meet at the same time, the same days of the week, if at all possible, because my students already had that schedule. It was already built into their lives. So I wanted to be able to do that. And I also wanted to be able to retain some of our class routine. This is just a screenshot of something that when we get to class, we have some math problems up on the board and my students take turns writing them out and finding out the answers. And through Zoom and the screen share option, they were all able to figure out how to do that. Some of them were kind of scratchy because they're using their fingers on their phones and it's a little bit difficult, but they're doing a great job learning this platform. So another couple of things that have been really helpful. I know that Jessica and Rebecca mentioned the breakout rooms. Those have been really helpful for my students. I put them in there for a small group if they just need a little bit of extra help, or my tutors will come to class and I may break out the students into different groups, into different breakout rooms with my tutors. And also the screen sharing option, as we're using it now, but that's been just terrific. And I don't know if many of you know this, but you can also link other websites. And this is Desmos, which we use for a graphing calculator. So my students are able to see some of the things that we do there. It's been a little bit challenging because of course it's all new to us, but I try to emphasize to my students that one of the greatest benefits that they're learning during this time that we're all learning is digital literacy. And these are skills that my students are going to be able to take with them after they leave our program and go on to the next phase of their lives. So I'm really excited for them that they're able to do that. And I do try to record my classes. So if students want to see them later, they can, or I can record them for my tutors, but that's been a really helpful area as well. The other thing I use is Google Classroom. And this is kind of my one-stop shop. All of my students are pretty close in level right now. So I have the opportunity to assign just one thing for them and they're all working on the same thing. So that's what I do with Google Classroom. And one of the great things about Google Classroom is that you can link it with other platforms. I have a few listed here: Khan Academy, Edpuzzle, YouTube. And if you have an account in both of those, you can link them together. And it's really terrific and even does some of the grading for you, which is just terrific. But it's helpful for my students to be able to just go to one place, find everything they need rather than bopping all over the internet to find their assignments. So again, we're just building digital literacy. And there's several really good YouTube tutorials that you can, for setting up a Google Classroom. It's not difficult to do, so I recommend if you're interested in that, just check out the YouTube tutorials and set up a fake classroom and just try to get your hands dirty with that. I think you'll find it really beneficial to your students. And of course, we are building that community, that sense of community with the Google Classroom. Like I said, all of my students have the same assignment and we're able to make comments and talk to each other. And I don't use it just for assignments. I also add non-school related questions like, what did you do this weekend? And they can just tag a comment in there and tell us. We get the conversation going. I try to do virtual challenges. When we were in our physical classroom, we would have raffle tickets and they would win prizes now and then for things that they did. And of course, we couldn't do that now, but I did try to enter a few different challenges. Like over spring break, we had a sunshine challenge where I recommended that they all get outside, keep track of how much time they spent outside, trying to promote health and fitness and trying to keep their brains and their bodies moving as much as possible. So, one of my students won a prize and I just sent it right from Amazon so it can directly go right to his house. So that was kind of a nice thing to be able to build some of that community. And as far as Zoom goes, that is just a terrific platform for that sense of community for our students. It's been a real joy for me and my students, I think, to get to know one another more. There's just that sense of vulnerability and acceptance when we can go into each other's homes, meet their families, their children. Up in the upper left here, this is one of my students introducing his bearded dragon named Toothless to our students. We invited the children one evening and he did a whole presentation for them, and it was just so engaging, and that just gets everybody coming back for more. You can see the expressions of the kids. They were just so excited about that. And then I do try to focus on some of my students' children. All of my students, with the exception of the one with the bearded dragon, they all have children at home. They're all, of course, home, being homeschooled now. And so I'm just trying to help promote literacy in their home. I'm trying to encourage them to continue to read to their children. So I started to do a story time with their kids at the end of the evening. And so I just use the Kindle Cloud reader, and it allows you to scroll through the books. I was just aiming for like the middle age of my students, and they just really loved it. It was a real sense of bonding, and I think it just makes them want to come back more the next time. So I'm just trying to think of different ways to build the community in my classroom and encourage my students to keep coming to class, make it as fun and enjoyable as possible. So that's our goal with that. And of course, community just starts with our team. This is our team at the Literacy Alliance in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we're just really thankful for our leadership and the site coordinators and the teachers that are all working so hard. We try to share ideas and bolster each other's weaknesses and bring our strengths and help one another. So I'm just really thankful for that community effort in our team. So that's about what I have, and I will stop sharing my screen here.
Actually, Francine,
yes.
Can you share, I think you shared yesterday a video of your, you or Brian one did, shared a video of your like classroom experiences. Can one of you do that so we can see another example of what your kind of distance learning classroom looks like the actual kind of how it works?
Brian, do you have that in front of you? Otherwise, I can try to find it really quickly.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, I'm afraid.
You can write that number as a fraction. Let me just
Even
see if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, it might take me just a second here.
Okay, that's fine. While you guys are doing that, I am going to unmute Jessica and Rebecca as well, and we are going to start answering some questions. So we have a couple of just kind of broad questions. One of them is, just in general, now that you're doing distance learning, how often are you meeting with students, and then how long are those learning sessions?
So for our Zoom classes, they're once a week for 2 hours. We have several going on at this time. So for the intermediate ESL students there, they could definitely jump in on 2 if they wanted to. But for mostly everyone else, they're working with their tutors once a week. And then they have the option to jump into either a beginner ESL class or an intermediate ESL class. And the same for our basic literacy students. They have one option a week to jump onto that Zoom class.
And do you find that like 2 hours, people don't have a problem with meeting for that long on like Zoom?
I think because we have the breakout sessions, it does break things up a bit for the students, and it kind of, you know, a different scenery, I guess, within the breakout session. So with the first 2 times that we did it, the first time we did it, we didn't have a breakout session. So that seemed a little bit long, but the second and the third times that we've done it, the students have really appreciated those smaller group sessions. So 2 hours, I think, was perfect.
Great, great. And Francine and Brian, what about you guys? So about how often and for how long?
Yeah, for us, the teachers, I believe, have been aligning the days of the week and the times of day with what was normally done during their face-to-face classes. And as Francine pointed out, for continuity's sake, we're doing that. However, we're not doing it for the full 3 hours per class session. I think teachers are mostly doing it for an hour, maybe an hour and a half at the most.
Yeah,
okay.
what I was doing with my students, as Brian said, we meet for 3 hours a week generally. So I'm doing an hour and a half of Zoom class with them. And then the other hour and a half of time that they need, I try to enter those assignments into the Google Classroom. And then as long as they get those assignments done, then they're earning credit towards their 3 hours. So I just try to break it up like that. I have that video. I can try to play some of this if you like.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. Let's play it like a couple of minutes.
Sure. Is it working?
No, we see it, but it's not playing.
Yeah, let me try it again here.
Can be changed into a fraction. So in that case, it is a rational number. It doesn't go on forever. You can write it as a fraction. That means it's rational. Okay? Now go back to number 3 on your page there. And we have number 4 out of number 3. It has 99 hundredths, right? 0.99. See that, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
The very bottom here, number 4 of 3. So is that number rational or irrational?
Rational. Rational.
Okay, how do you know that it's rational?
Because you can put 0.99 over 100.
Yeah, you can write it as a fraction, can't you? Because it's in the hundredths place. And if you plugged it into your calculator, what would you get? 99 over 100 would be what?
99 hundredths.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I don't know if for those of you that remember, I think you've all taken the readiness test at least once. The very first question on the readiness test gives you a number and it asks you what kind of a number is it? Is it rational? Is it irrational? Is it a real number, etc.? Okay, so it's really important, and it's just vocabulary. If you can just know the vocabulary, you've got that one. Okay?
Great, great. Thank you, Francine.
You're welcome.
This actually brings up another question. A lot of people had questions around materials. What materials are you using? Do the students have the books at home? Did they have them beforehand? If not, how did you get them to the students? And it looked like, Francine, in yours, it looked like in your Google Classroom, you were kind of pulling things from off the internet or YouTube or things like that. And it looked like right there you had a Word document that you were using in the Zoom. Is that correct?
Yes, well, like I mentioned before, I had 30 very precious minutes with my students before we moved into distance learning. So at that time, I just bombarded them with materials. I made sure they all had the same math and language materials that we were going to be using because I knew that I was going to try to keep them on the same page. But as far as the Google Classroom goes, I always try to link other videos, interesting things. I try not to make it so monotonous and boring for them. It's hard to sit in front of a computer for 3 hours. It really is. So I try to break it up so that they're doing a little bit of video, a little bit of writing work. But if you can just delve into Edpuzzle, YouTube, Khan Academy, there's just a plethora of things that you can just link right in there. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah,
And Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, for us, we utilize YouTube videos. We send those out a week ahead of time, as well as any vocabulary that we're going to talk about the following week. And then I share my screen, so everybody's looking at the same screen as you saw Francine share there. So we're all looking at the same thing, and then we're able to talk, through the dialogues and through the drills, that type of thing.
Rebecca, I noticed in one of the videos with your reading group, they had the books, but someone was doing the homework, and then you were talking about how she was texting you a picture of her homework so you could look at it before you guys met.
That's right. So yeah, with our reading and writing group, everybody has a book, and so they all had those at home, which was wonderful as far as working with my basic literacy students. So what I had asked them to do, just to help us get through the reading material part rather than going through the exercises, was to email or text me pictures of their their homework that they've done so that I can go through that and pull out pieces that I thought we should work on, rather than, because we don't have a lot of time with my reading and writing students. We do just work for an hour. And so I wanted to make sure that we hit upon those pieces that would be most helpful to students so that we could get to the reading materials and work through that.
Great. We've had a lot of questions about kind of Zoom functionality. And you guys have talked about using the whiteboard on Zoom and using the breakout rooms on Zoom. And I know other people have responded in the chats and said that Zoom has a lot of good training videos, and there are training videos on YouTube and things like that. And we may try to put together, see if we can get someone to do a webinar just on Zoom and how to use it and how to use some of those functionalities, since there seems to be a lot of interest in that. But I just wondered if each of you could talk a little bit about your experience with Zoom kind of before all this started, and just real quick, how did you learn how to use it?
I'll start because I don't think I knew what it was. This is Jessica. Until like day one of shelter in place and everything became a Zoom meeting all of a sudden. So I think there's something about how easy it is when you're a novice to use it and start playing around and figuring it out that's made it become so popular, right?
Yeah, and then for me, I had no idea. I didn't even know it existed before the shelter in place came down. So I started to search for YouTube videos on it, and then I found within just the Zoom website, they have some excellent, very short videos on how to navigate the site and just get yourself up and running on it.
There's a link on our distance learning page, which I don't think I put up there yet. I'll put that link there, but of Zoom tutorials that people liked because they were really, really short on YouTube. It's like one function at a time. I think it's Zoom's playlist on there, so that's under tutorials on using online platforms.
And Jessica, while you're saying that, we had some people, as you guys were talking about, where you had posted videos on your websites and things like that, asking if you would share those links. So if I could get the two of you, the two groups, to just post in the chat room any of the links that that you guys have used that are either on your own websites or kind of other valuable links that from places that you talked about. And then we will copy those out of the chat and make sure they go into the email that we send out to everybody.
I just stuck our page in there. So we have our favorite things so far all on one page on literacynj.org, blah, blah, blah. So I put that in there.
Perfect. And let's see, we've had some questions about just the technology that was available to students. And Brian, I think you mentioned you were like surprised at like the complete lack of technology for students in terms of computers and things like that. But you said most people had phones. So if you could talk a little bit about kind of, as you're using Zoom and Google Classroom, the technology, different technologies that your students are using, and how you've dealt with people using kind of the same thing, but on a variety of platforms. Has that been an issue?
Our situation was we had the Aztec, but then since so many students didn't have computers or internet access or both, they had to rely on their mobile devices, and Aztec doesn't work very well on mobile devices. It's built for it, but it's not optimized for it. And so teachers had to improvise and scramble and figure out what the students had available and work with them that way. Francine, do you have anything to add?
There were a couple of challenges. Like, students needed to learn how to submit assignments. That was a little bit tricky. I just had them take pictures of their assignments and then submit them to the Google Classroom. And then I would just constantly link videos, send them videos. This is how you submit an assignment, and how to log on to here. And I just tried to keep sending it. If I needed to send it over and over and over again, I did. And you know what? They figured it out, and they're teaching me things about Zoom that I don't know about. And it's just a real treat to watch their digital literacy grow.
And Jessica, Rebecca, what about you guys?
Yeah, I would say what Francine has said is about emailing your students the YouTube video or whatever video it is to show them how to access Zoom or whatever platform that you're using beforehand. That is very helpful. As far as technology, the biggest issue that we're seeing right now is competing with the computer with their children. We are offering classes at the same time that we had offered them before we are, quarantined. So it's at 10 o'clock in the morning and children have to be online to talk to teachers at that time. So that's one of the biggest issues that we have, is just that competing with the technology in the home.
Great. Okay, we are winding down. Let's see if I can share my screen. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for attending. As I said, the presenters have agreed to stay on, and we will kind of be going through the questions that everybody has submitted and try to answer as many of those as possible. If you want to stay on and listen to the answers to the questions, you are welcome to do that. As I said, we will send out a recording on Monday. Also, if you are doing distance learning in your program and you'd like to kind of speak to what you are doing, if it's different than using Zoom or using Google Classroom, or maybe with a different group of students, I would love to talk with you about what you're doing and maybe hopefully recruit you to do a presentation like this. I think Jessica, Rebecca, Francine, and Brian would hopefully tell you it was relatively painless. So thank you all for attending. We'll tell you guys you're free to go right now if you want, but like I said, you're also free to stick around and listen to the answers to the questions you submitted. And we'll let you know about mid next week if there's another one that we've scheduled for next Friday. Thank you. Okay, so presenters, let's see. We had, there were some questions about the issue of doing Zoom presentations while people were in their home, or doing Zoom classrooms while people were in their homes and kids are running about and things like that. Are you guys worried about any legal issues? Do you have students, if you're recording, do you have them sign waivers if you're doing recordings to share with other tutors in your program? How are you handling any of those kind of legal issues that might be, or have you thought about those?
What we do is we have all of our students sign a media release when they come into the classes, start in the classes, and we have that, and then we still respect their decision if somebody comes into the class to take video or pictures, or in this particular case, if we're thinking of sharing a Zoom recording, we will ask the students if it's all right with them if we share it, and we get that verbal approval.
Yeah, and I would say my students were really excited that they were going to be featured today. I must say.
That sounds like pretty much the same as what we have. We have the media release, and then Rebecca's check, or the other people are checking in with everyone on the recordings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we tell people, once we verify who they are not required to share their video with us.
And so, did somebody have something else to say about that?
I was just thinking about the other side, about having family members be part of the class. And I can't totally think of the legal implications. So I think it hasn't occurred to me yet. We've sort of been embracing that as an opportunity because people are home, to sort of like extend learning and like get a little family literacy into it. So there might be something we need to think about that we haven't yet.
Okay, good point. So we had a question from someone that basically said, all I have are the phone numbers for my students. So I think the kind of essence of this question is, unlike you guys who had, you know, maybe an opportunity to set things up before we had the shelter in place orders go out, that this kind of happened to them and all they have are the phone numbers. And Jessica, I think you and I talked about how you approached getting in touch with people just using their phone kind of that first week, and then getting them started on these other technologies. Can you walk through the process you use to kind of build up people's level of technology usage?
I mean, you can see from that little chart I showed, it still is about a quarter of the remote tutoring is happening with a combination of phone and email, and like texting things and emailing back and forth and getting on the phone to check in. So I feel like we're in the beginning stages of moving that, but I know like Rebecca can probably answer it better because she's one of the people I've seen get tutors up by having them come in and observe a class someone was doing, like on Zoom, for example, and then be ready to take one over. So I think that kind of mentoring is a technique that a lot of the staff have been using. You want to add to that, Rebecca?
I think that there are definitely ways to go about, even if they don't want to move to a video chat, there are ways to go about using phone to connect with your students. I have a tutor who just sends out YouTube videos, and then he calls them individually as 6 students and calls them individually and talks to them for an hour. This is just something that he has decided to do over the phone, and he has beginner level ESL students. So he has learned how to make it work. And so it is possible.
Okay, great. And then we actually have a question from someone. Any ideas for programs with no tech? Do you have you had any opportunity to serve students who maybe don't even have that cell phone? Any thoughts or experiences with like delivering teaching packets or things like that?
We do have a couple of students who are getting packets. We will mail them or arrange to meet them in a parking lot somewhere. And then, and then there'll be the obverse of that, where they'd have to, once they've completed the work, arrange to turn it in. And then it's by phone. I mean, about everybody has a phone to be able to provide feedback on the work they've done.
Okay. Here's a question. Just, were all your volunteers teaching small groups initially, or do you also do one-on-one tutoring? And I think I would just expand that to just talk more generally about how have your volunteers adapted to this distance teaching process, and have their roles changed any? You know, just have you had to move volunteers around to work with different students because of, the comfort that some volunteers may have felt and others may not have, or things like that?
We, similar to Jessica and Rebecca, we, as the teachers were getting and the site coordinators were getting the classes, the online classes going, we contacted all of our volunteers who would normally be serving in the classes, and asked them about what their technology capabilities are, and what their willingness was to join the Zoom meetings to help out, contact students individually to help them with specific concepts or problems, academic problems they were having, and those sorts of things. And we had a good representation of those volunteers who were willing to do that, and volunteers who are willing to work with students who are not, who are outside of the class that they're normally working in. So it's a resource that has been very helpful.
Yeah, for us, we've had, we do one-to-one, we do small group, and we have some large classes. And with the large classes, I think what was helpful for those tutors was to say to them, if you could only, if you could at least take 3 to 4 of these students who don't have a tutor. A lot of our students that are in a class also have a tutor. So if you could take some students that don't have a tutor and work with them during this time, and we'll make sure that everybody else is at least in a class on Zoom or is matched with another tutor. Because I think it felt overwhelming to be like, I have to go and now work with 10 students online. How is that going to look? And if we were able to take away and take some of that off their plate for them, they were able to like, okay, this is okay, I can go forward with this.
I have heard a number of stories about like situations that were groups and now they're multiple one-to-one meetings because that's just easier for some people to get their hands around.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But also like for us, like our next thing, like we want to think about is how we share classes across sites, since location is a non-issue in this case. You know, we can start offering some things that people can jump in on from no matter where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be part of phase 3.
So like once you kind of get everybody comfortable with this process, it really does open up some unique learning opportunities and tutoring opportunities. As you said, location is no longer an issue. So
Right.
Excellent. That's a great way of thinking about it. We had a question about just GED testing, like pre-testing, post-testing, or kind of are you ready to test, you know, pass the GED? Have you guys had any issues handling those sorts of things, or how have you handled?
Well, our challenge has been that the testing center in Allen County, Indiana, is at the school corporation, and they're closed through the rest of the school year. But it's but the people who are working there and the adult and continuing education department who do the testing in the testing center, they may have an opportunity to get back in there and start scheduling testing. So the actual task, we don't do GED, but we do task in Indiana. The actual task testing is on hold right now. And so we just stay in touch with them and hope to find out as soon as they're able to reopen when we can start scheduling our students there again. Francine, has there been any discussion among the teachers about practice testing? I'm not sure how it can be done because it's paper and pencil.
Right, yeah. I mean, there are a couple of things online that we could use that may help, but at least in my class right now, I'm just trying to shore up their skills, knowing what they're going to be looking at on the test. I'm just trying to shore up those skills now so that when it does open back up and they're ready to take it, they can go right away and take it. That's my goal for them.
Mm-hmm.
That is the same challenge here. Nobody can test, so the motivation is a little challenging with the high population because they're not marching towards a test. It's just sort of up in the air.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great time to get ready and practice. That's the sell, you know. That's what we have to sell everyone.
So speaking of motivation, about like if you had to give a percentage of the number of students that you have been able to maintain contact with and maintain kind of instructional services with, what would you put that percentage as? Like, you know, do you think you're serving half, more than half, less than half?
I would say about half.
Okay.
I think we're probably at less than half. Like it was like 30% after the first 2 weeks, and now it seems to be growing. So it's a little hard to estimate, but I mean, I'm hoping for like half to 60%. You know, that seems like a realistic goal.
That does seem like a realistic goal. Have any of you signed up new students since this started? There was a question about, are you advertising that this is something that you're providing to people, and have you had any luck recruiting new students?
Well, that's a challenge we have. But when this started, we had an intake orientation scheduled. We had a number of students scheduled for it. to participate in it and get prepared for class and then get placed in class. We had to cancel that one, and we got one coming up at the end of this month, and we're in discussion and planning on how to intake those students in a different way. And so we're working on getting those. There's about 12 of those. And then we're starting to hear from, from our referral sources of students who are interested. So we'll be following up with them and finding ways to intake them as well.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, on our end is we were starting to intake new students in March, and some of those students we've been able to, we had already registered and tested, so we were able to bring them into the fold as far as the ESL Zoom classes go. But we have not heard, in my program, I have not heard from any new potential students.
I was going to say there's a couple programs where we have let in some new students because they were sort of in the pipeline. They were about to come in. And so even though they can't be pre-tested or have official intake, we've let them in because there was space for them available. So it's sort of like case by case, but we're certainly not recruiting new students.
Okay. There's a couple of questions about just the mechanics of Google Classroom, and I'm going to ask them because I think they kind of speak to larger issues. So one is, do you have to have a like a Gmail address in order to use Google Classroom?
I believe so.
Okay.
That's the way that I've been successful. And I would just recommend if people are looking at setting up a Google Classroom and thinking ahead about how to link some of those other platforms, platforms, for instance, Edpuzzle or whatever it is that you're using, because then you'll be able to link both the classroom with that other platform, and it makes life a lot easier. So if you can kind of plan ahead and just plan to use that Gmail account, that'll be to your benefit.
Okay. And Francine, did you find that most people had a Gmail account or at least an email account, or did you have to walk students through that process of creating a Gmail account?
Actually, what I found is that 100% of my students already had a Gmail account.
Oh, wow.
So it must be very popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great. And if they didn't, I would just set them up with one. But yeah, they need one for the classroom though.
And Jessica, Rebecca, what about you guys? Have you found that are you using something that requires people to have a Gmail account or an email account? And have you found that most of your students have an email address, or they needed to set up one?
At this time, we're not using anything that requires an email address. We use Google Classroom only in the sense to share large files with tutors, but not with students, yeah.
I can't really think of anyone. I think maybe 3 or 4 people were using it in the whole state when I did the survey. So we're not really there yet. We're going to call Francine when we're ready, though. Good call.
Yeah, Francine sounds like she's got that Google Classroom down.
Yeah.
One of you mentioned a TED Talk presenter. Can you say that name again?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. Someone asked about that. That was Jocko Willink's TED Talk on extreme ownership.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I kind of going through and so here's one. Just can you talk about if you're using breakout sessions in Zoom, can you talk about how you're using them? If students are breaking out, is there a tutor in each breakout session? For those of us who are not familiar with breakout sessions, can you as the host kind of move from session to session? How does that work?
Yeah, so with the breakout session as the host, I can manually place students and a volunteer in a particular room. And then also as a host, I can jump around from room to room just to make sure that everything's okay. What I've noticed, one of the challenges with the breakout session is that if you're just using a basic Zoom account, that you can't you can't assign co-host. So meaning that once you have a tutor in with students in a breakout session, that tutor does not have the option to mute everyone in case like there's some background noise with like, something's happening in somebody's house and you just need to mute them. That's not an option as it would be if you were a host.
And another one thing that I learned about the breakout rooms, I tend to do the same thing if I have enough tutors to put one in each group. But as far as the recording goes, there's probably another way, but I haven't figured it out. But for the main recording, it records wherever I am. So if I pop into a breakout room, it'll record that breakout room, but it won't be recording everything else. So it's like the recording follows me wherever I go as the main host.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. We had a question about just kind of data. So for your learners that are using cell phone data and any of your staff or volunteers who may not have a computer at home and so are doing things via phone, have you had any issues with data usage, students running over their data plans, or your volunteers using up their data plans, or being hesitant to call students, or students call volunteers with their home phone numbers or their cell phone numbers?
I'm not aware of any issues with that. Our staff either use their own phone or they go through Google Voice. And I haven't heard of any students having any issues with that.
I think I had one student that had to up his plan.
You had one student that had to up their plan?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we use Google Voice too as staff to communicate with students. As far as volunteers reaching out to students, this is something that they've been doing all along, using their cell phone either to call or text students. So I haven't heard anything.
Okay, and let's see.
Yeah, there was a remark in the chat that a lot of cell phone carriers are increasing data right now, and I've heard that as well.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. And if not, so it may serve people's purpose to just encourage students or volunteers to contact their providers and see if they can up their data without a charge. Let's see. I think we've covered most of them. I'm going back and reviewing the questions in the chat now, and I'm not seeing anything that's really different. So Google Voice. Who said they were using that? Jessica, was that you?
Rebecca was talking about that.
Rebecca was talking about that. Can you talk a little bit about what Google Voice is?
I think Brian is also using it too. Yeah, he had. But Google Voice is it's an app that you can download through your app store, and you can pick a phone number through it, so you don't have to use your own phone number. You can also, you can text through this app. You can call, and then we are also using it. You can pull it up as a browser on your computer, so that you can be texting through the computer to students as well.
Oh, so that makes texting and sharing things via text a little bit easier.
Definitely.
And students can leave you a voice message, and Google will transfer it to text as well.
Oh, that's great.
And send you an email.
That's great. That's great. So a nice little tool. Last question I found. How are you guys tracking your volunteer hours, instructional hours, student hours? How are you kind of doing that? How are you counting those?
Everyone's keeping a log, so when a student sends them an email, they mark it as 10 minutes. When they get a text from the student, they mark it as 10 minutes worth of contact time. It's not exactly contact time, but then any actual contact time, a phone call, a Zoom contact, that actual time is recorded or logged, and then There's the Aztec. If a student has done work on Aztec, we'll be able to run time on task reports. And then there's packets where the teachers assign times for completed packets.
Yeah, we also, I mean, we collect hours from tutors because they're all over the place in different sites anyway. But we added that, like being able to assign work and estimate how long that takes, because sometimes it's just a phone call check-in. And we want to capture the time of the assignment that was done, not live between tutor and student. But we also added prep time for tutors as soon as this started, so we could try to learn what this was taking. You know, we don't usually count that, we usually assume it, but we figured it would be a huge number. So we're going to be looking at what it's taking to prepare for doing this distance learning as a new thing too.
And then Brian, I can't remember if you and Francine talked about how you are using your site coordinators in your presentation, but if not, can you talk a little bit about that, what you shared with me about how they're contacting students ahead of time?
Yeah, they're managing a lot of the communication. And what they're doing is they're checking in with students, reminding them that there's a Zoom session coming up. When the Zoom session begins, the site coordinators will be joining the Zoom session, and the site coordinators will check to see which students haven't joined yet. And they'll get right on the phone or text and communicate with the students to find out if there are technical issues and try to help them through that so they can join the meeting, or if there are other issues that are going on that just they're keeping them out of the meeting at this particular time. And they are, they're in contact with the students at least once, and probably some of them more than once per day.
Okay, so they're really being used, you guys are really using them to keep the students engaged on a regular basis and just kind of make sure that they are attending classes. I think that's a great idea.
Make sure that keeping that communication channel open so that the students know we're thinking about them, that we expect them to attend classes, and that we're here to help them if they need help with getting into the classes, with the classwork, and if they have home life issues going on, helping them with referrals and suggestions. And the teachers are being in touch with the students too. Teachers are contacting them outside of the Zoom sessions to do some one-on-ones and just to be available for them to help with that instruction.
Excellent, excellent. All right, we've got one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. So we had a question from someone that said they're kind of obliged to give a final exam, I guess, at the end of their class sessions, or maybe when students complete a particular book in a series of instructional books or something like that. How are you guys handling any kind of, if it's, not GED testing, but just any kind of pre-test, post-testing, being able to report, student gains at this point?
We're kind of on hold with that right now. We're recording outputs, numbers of students, numbers of hours, but we're kind of easing towards some way to do. We use TABE, to do pre-post testing.
Okay, perfect. And what about you guys?
Yeah, we're
Rebecca?
collecting. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, so yeah, just as Jessica was saying, we're collecting data, but if just thinking, we're not doing any pre or post testing right now. We are, if just thinking of, I have kids who are working at home right now, and if you're looking to give a test, maybe an idea would be going through Google Forms. That's a way that you could present a test to students online.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay. let's see. So the question about the exams was thinking about the final exams, not TABE, but I think the suggestion of creating final exams using Google Forms, probably a good suggestion, a good way to handle that. All right, I think I've covered kind of a collection of all the questions that we had. So thank you all very much for sticking around and being willing to share what you're doing and answer everyone's questions. And really appreciate it. And we got a lot of, I think, really good response in the chat room from people saying that this was just really valuable. So thank you once again.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
organizing it.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone.
Good thing. We're excited for the next one.
Yeah, I am too. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.